Thank you for joining me. I'm Patty Otto from Great Copy Patterns here at Sew It Online, and I'm going to show you how to get a professional finish with elastic waistbands with my Sew Elastic Waistbands Like a Pro presentation. Now we're going to do this insertion waistband today, and that is where the elastic is stitched to the top of the fabric, brought to the wrong side, and then stitched. And I'm going to show you how to achieve that so it looks nice and professional. First thing I want to talk about is elastic, and we have several different types of elastic. The first two are a braided elastic, and this one is poly, this one is cotton. Your cotton elastics sometimes have a chlorine-resistant finish, but the disadvantage of a braided elastic is that it narrows when you stretch it. The next one is a non-roll elastic. I think it's kind of heavy for a waistband, and if you are using this and it rolls a lot, then you're not using the right amount of elastic. And you need to be honest with yourself. You need to get that tape measure out, and you need to actually measure. Now, the disadvantage of the non-roll elastic is you cannot stitch through it, and that makes it just way too bulky. This next one is called a woven elastic, and what's nice about the woven is it doesn't narrow. It's very firm. It has a good recovery to it, and that is the woven elastic. Of course, we have draw cord elastic, and that has a cord in the middle, and that can be worn on the outside of the pants or the inside of the pants. Now, this one is my favorite, and this is a knit elastic, and I carry this on my website. It has great stretch and recovery to it. It's firm yet soft, and it can be stitched through easily without distorting the elastic. So those are just some of our choices when it comes to elastic. Now, when you're doing an insertion waistband, the general rule used to be 2 inches less than your waist. And I have gone with 10% less than your waist, and let me show you why. Here's a little sample that I like to show. And this is 4 inches from here to here. And I measured 4 inches of elastic, and when I stitched through it, the elastic grew. And the more you stitch through it, the more the elastic grew. So if you have a 40-inch waist and you use 38 inches of elastic, by the time you're done stitching through that waistband is 42.5 inches, so it's not going to stay up. So my rule for insertion waistbands is your waist minus 10%. And that has worked really well for most people that I do pants fittings for. Now we have our elastic, and we're ready to join it. And this is how I like to join my elastic. I like to cut 2 clean edges, and I like to select a really wide zigzag, and either I will use a piece of cutaway stabilizer, or I will use a piece of fusible interfacing and fuse that over the ends. I will select the very widest zigzag stitch that I have and zigzag those raw ends together. Now, if you don't have a very wide zigzag, then zigzag each side to the stabilizer and then zigzag across. But that's how we're going to join our elastic. It's a very lightweight, no bulk join, and I like to place that at the back of my pants or skirts. Now, next I'm going to show you some techniques for applying this. Okay. We are going to do this insertion waistband, and I really like the way that looks. But there are a couple tricks to getting it to look like that. First of all, we are going to take our elastic, and here's where I've joined the elastic, and we're going to mark it in quarters. So I'm going to put that at the center back, put this at the center front, and mark it with either a fabric marker, or in this case I've marked it with a pin, and fold it one more time. And those are your quarters. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing with the waistband of our elastic. And if you have a front and back seam and side seams, those are your quarters. If you don't have a set front and back seam, like maybe for a skirt, you'll just simply fold that in half and mark those quarters. Now we are going to match our elastic to our waistband, and that will look like this. And I've pinned those quarters in place. Now here's my tip. I have made hundreds of these. 4 younger siblings, 4 children, now a couple grandchildren, tons of nieces and nephews. Pajama pants are my thing. What I've done over the years is I've poked myself with those pins, because you will notice that my elastic is smaller than my waistband. And with the exception of dance wear and things like that, that's going to be the rule. And I need to stretch this elastic so that it's the same length as the top of my pant or skirt. And I keep poking myself with these pins. Well, I've developed a technique that's going to eliminate that and make your sewing much easier. I'm going to replace those pins with safety pins. And you're going to do that at the lower edge of the elastic. And now your pins are out of the way. And I can easily go to my serger, and I can serge that waistband without poking myself with the pins. I don't have to worry about removing clips or pins. All I have to focus on is serging or zigzag stitch. Now, you will need to stretch this, and you need to stretch it the same width as your pant fabric. You don't need to overstretch, especially if it's a knit. Now, what I'm going to demo next is I'm going to show you how to serge that elastic to the top of the pant. This step is attaching the elastic to the fabric. That's all this step does. You can use a 3-thread serger. You can use a 4-thread serger. You can use a zigzag stitch. All of those are appropriate for finishing. I, of course, like my serger because I have numerous sergers and it goes super quick and easy. But a zigzag is also very appropriate, especially for those that are new to doing this technique. And I will show that in just a moment. I do want to talk about stitch length, and this is really important. Here is a stitch length on my serger of 2.5. And a lot of people seam with that, but with the elastic, as soon as you release that stretch, those stitches are really close together. And if you need to pull these threads out, you're going to be saying bad words. So you want to stitch that elastic on with a stitch length of 4. And I know a lot of people are afraid to use that longer stitch length, but as soon as you release that stretch, you will notice the stitches are not that close together. Like I said, this step, the only thing this step is doing is attaching the elastic to the top of the pant. Now I'm going to my serger and I'm going to show you how to attach this evenly. Okay, I'm at the serger now, and what I'm going to be doing is attaching the elastic to the waistband of my pant. As I said, serger is fine, zigzag is also fine. With the serger, the next decision we need to make is knife up or knife down. And this knit elastic that I use is not one of those trimmable elastics, so I'd like to be sure that I don't cut any of the fabric. The other thing I like to do is make sure that when I'm stretching this, I see just a little bit of that fabric peeking out. That way I will avoid a situation like this where I've missed it. So if just a little bit of that fabric peeks out, that's fine. Now if I lock my knife blade down, any little fabric that's sticking out will simply roll over the waistband. We're not trimming much of anything. I just want a little 1/8 of an inch of that fabric to stick out. Now this next step is real important. Make sure that you work in quarters. Okay? If you have a really large waistband, you may want to mark it in 1/8 instead of quarters. And this next step is real important. We are going to place this underneath our presser foot. We are going to stretch. We are going to serge, holding that stretch. And when my hand comes to the presser foot, I'm going to stop serging. And it doesn't matter if your needles are up or down. And we're going to gently release that stretch. So once again, that is stretching, serging, hold that stretch in front and behind the machine. And then when I come to this hand, I'm going to stop serging and I'm going to release that stretch. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you. And my needles are up, and I'm going to put my foot down. Once again, I want you to watch my hand position. Grab the elastic and the pant or skirt behind, stretch this, and if excess fabric is peeking out, I use this forearm to just gently pull the fabric. So I just see just a little bit of fabric. If you need to add more safety pins to this, that's fine. You'll probably need a third hand, someone to stretch while you attach the pins. So I'm going to serge. I stopped and I released the stretch gently. If you don't do it in that order, you're going to break needles. And I have 2 needles in this serger and I'm going to break both of them. And I'm going to be saying bad words. Once again, I'm going to take my stitch length to 4, hand behind, hand in front, stretch evenly, and serge. Stop, serging. My needles are in, and if I release this stretch gently to both of them, I'm in no danger of breaking those needles. Once again, even stretch. I know this is in the way here. Even stretch. Now I'm back at the beginning. I'm simply going to overlap an inch and then veer off. Now, I disengaged my knife, so my beginning tails are right here. I'm simply going to clip them along with the other ones, and there is the elastic attached to my waistband. And I did this on purpose. I missed an area right here. I could tell that my fabric I could not see it peeking out, so I missed this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to this side, I'll clip my needle threads, and I recommend using different color threads if you're a beginning serger, because this is inside. No one's going to see this. So once I have clipped my threads, I'll pull my needle threads that will take this area, remove this area, and if you need to, go ahead and re-sew this area with this side up, because now you know that you have even stretch all the way around. So that is how we attach the elastic to our waistband. Now the next technique is to fold this over, and we want to get that folded really nice. And I'm going to show you several different ways to finish this. But this technique requires a third hand. If you don't have a third hand, I'm going to show you a technique on the ironing board that's going to make this very easy for you to do. So join me at the ironing board. For this next step, I'm going to use my ironing board as my third hand. And actually, I'm going to use the ironing board and this hip. This step is very important. We need to fold this over, and we need to snug that elastic right up against that fold. And this is the step that makes that garment have a professional finish. And there are several things that can go wrong when you're doing this step. First of all, what normally happens is this. And what happened is that the elastic is not tight inside this casing. And I'm going to show you a technique to help with that. But this is normally what happens. It just looks very sloppy. Okay. The next thing that could go wrong is when you pull this over, you've pulled it too tight. And that looks like this. Okay. Third thing that happens is when you folded this over, your seam did not line up. There is my seam here. Here is my seam here. They did not line up. So you get this, what I call shearing. And if you look at it from this side, it just doesn't look as pretty. So this is how we're going to fold that over and keep that nice and snug in there. As I said, if you have a person with a third hand, that is great, but I don't always have that. So I'm going to fold this over, and I'm going to hold this side with my hip. Well, let's switch the other hip here. Or you can hold it underneath, and I am going to apply clips. Now you see how this is nice and snug, and part of that is putting it on the ironing board helps snug that up. And then I'm going to put my clips over here. And what that allows me to do is keep that elastic nice and snug inside this fold. And I will be stitching my first row of stitches right along here inside that serging stitch. You want to be as close to the elastic as you can. The farther up you go, the elastic tends to pull up like this while you're wearing it. So we want to be as close to that edge as possible. And I'm going to give you several different options. Now I'm just going to continue going around. Like I said, I would use my hip. This is a pair of PJs for one of our grandsons, so it's not very big. So I am able to grab it from underneath. And I'm just going to continue. See, as I pull this on, it pulls that fabric nice and snug against your hip. Against your elastic. And I'm going to continue, and I'm going to complete that. You want to clip about every 1.5 inches. What I am looking for is a finished waistband that looks like this. See how nice that looks? And that's the goal that we're after. And by using this technique, you're going to achieve that goal. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to sew that. I'm back at the machine, and for this step, I'm going to use a straight stitch. Once again, stitch length of 4. And I'm going to show you a couple different options. But first, I'm going to show you how to stitch this. Now, remember I said I wanted to stitch right along here, as close to the edge as I can. And I have my waistband clipped. And once again, we will be stretching. We want this to lay flat. Now, if you're using a knit fabric, don't overstretch it. Just stretch it so the elastic and the fabric are flat. And I'm going to put this underneath my presser foot. Now you will notice, and I know this might be in the way, but you will notice that I'm not using my free arm. I have my fabric here. And that's so I can see what I'm doing. I don't have to worry about fabric tucking underneath and me sewing something that I might not want to sew. I'm going to bring my presser foot down. Now once again, needle up or needle down is the question. If you sew with the needle down, what will happen is your stitches will be nice and straight. If you are concerned about breaking a needle, then sew with the needle up when you stop. We're going to do the same hand position as before, but the thing I want to show you is I use my wrist and forearm to pull that fabric so it stays nice and smooth. Even with this clips, it may want to work its way up. So we want it to be nice and smooth. Once again, hand behind, hand in front, and I'm going to stretch and I'm going to stitch along that elastic. Stop, release the stretch, reposition your hands. Try to move that out of the way. Stretch, sew. Stop sewing, my needle is down, and as long as I release the stretch evenly from front to back, I will not break a needle. Once again, my forearm is holding that fabric tight along here. If you have an extension table, it makes it even easier. If you were to do it in the round with the free arm, you're not going to have that surface to be able to pull this. And I'm going to continue. I started at the center back. And I got a little puckering there. I want to make sure I pull that down. And I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. Now I have ivory thread in the machine. That's what was in here. But they're pajamas for the boys. They don't really care what color they are. And I'm back to the beginning. I'm going to do a tie off. And needle up. Now I'm going to remove my clips and I'm going to do a second row of stitching along this top edge. And so that's how I would finish that. Now there are other ways we can finish this. Obviously, one row of stitches is the minimum you're going to do. And I know this is a little crooked. These small samples are hard to do compared to a full size of pants. But look at how nice that looks. My personal preference, especially on wovens, is 2 rows of stitching. And yes, I am catching that elastic in this top edge here. So see, because I folded it over evenly, I matched my seams. It looks really nice up and down. I don't have any of the shearing. Now another finish, and I do this a lot on the grandson's pants, especially the knits, a zigzag also works. You can do multiple rows of stitching, and that works great, especially with the draw cord elastic. Now the next 2 I'm going to show you are done stitching with the right side up. And this is a little more challenging. I don't recommend this for beginners, although I did just perfect a technique that's going to show you how to do this easily. This is a twin needle. And on knit fabric, that's going to have a lot of stretch to it. But when you're stitching with the right side out, it's a lot more challenging because you can't see where the edge of that elastic is, and you want both needles on the elastic. If you have one needle on and one needle off, you're going to have this pucker. And the other one that I really like is the Coverstitch, and that is done with a Coverstitch serger. You need to have either a dedicated Coverstitch or you need to have the Coverstitch option on your serger. And what I love about the Coverstitch, it's very professional looking. That's what you're going to see in ready-to-wear. But you remember, in ready-to-wear, the machine operator, and that's what I call them, that's all they do all day long, and their machine is set up to do this automatically. They're basically guiding the fabric. This is what I love about the Coverstitch, is it stretches forever. So I came up with this technique. I was doing this pair of pajama pants for our grandson, and it is a polyester lycra knit, and I was having a little trouble managing the fabric, so I came up with this technique. And you are going to use a wash-away thread. Now, I have stitched my sample in red thread because you will not be able to see the wash-away very easily. So what I did is, from the wrong side of the garment, I folded my elastic over and I clipped it, put my wonder clips on, and I zigzagged with my wash-away thread right on top of that serging thread for my elastic. Then I turned it over and went to my Coverstitch or your twin needle, and I had a guide to follow. You'll notice the yellow is my Coverstitch, the red would be my wash-away thread, which would be clear, but I've used red so that you can see it better. And that gave me a really nice, even Coverstitch finish, and I simply washed it and my zigzag stitch was gone. So like I said, it's always easier to stitch with the inside of the garment up, and then you can finish it with your twin needle or your Coverstitch, and that is going to give you just this really nice waistband finish. Now you will notice the tape, the yellow piece of ribbon. I always do that on the boys' pajamas because they have the attention span of a baby gnat. And so getting them in their pajamas is always a challenge. Put the cat down. No, I don't want to see those rocks. No, you're not going commando. Put your underwear on. Okay, put your pajamas on or no stories. That's usually the one that does it. And here is another option you can do. If I Coverstitch from the inside of the garment, there's my straight stitching, my Coverstitch ends up looking like this on the outside. And that's just purely decorative. Just another fun way to finish these elastic waistbands. Now I have a couple other tips for you. When you are finished with your waistband, what will happen is the elastic may look like this because you've stretched it a lot, you put a lot of thread into there. Turn the garment inside out, take it to your ironing board, and give it a good steam from the wrong side. If you have a cotton fabric, a woven, you can steam with the iron on it. If it's a knit, I probably would steam from above and then use my clapper to hold that steam in. But that's going to give you a really nice. Now behind me are some of my garments. We have my Maui pants. We have my Baja skirt. And this is the brand new Del Rey. Now I get asked a lot about using lightweight fabrics like rayon challis and your polys, because they can be a little challenging to handle, and you really need to have a great grain line. Those fabrics like to skew. So one of the things I use is best press. I absolutely love this. Here's a very lightweight knit tricot, and here is the knit. And a lot of people would say, oh, I don't ever want to sew with that. But if you pre-treat that fabric with best press, it stiffens it as a temporary stabilizer, allows you to easily handle those fabrics, and then they simply wash out. So don't be afraid to sew those very silky knits, those rayon chalets, things like that. The last thing I'm going to show you is a fitting tip, and this is really helpful. As women especially, we tend to put on this. I mean, it's hormones, it's nature, it's having a bunch of kids, but you will notice that my side seam is pulling forward because I've marked my elastic in quarters. What I want is my garment to look like this. So what I do is I take my elastic and I mark it like this. So here's my elastic, and here's the center back. Here's where I joined it, and here's my center front, and there's my other quarters. So I'm going to take a different color pin, and I'm going to insert it here. Here's my center back, and I've put 2 pins here. And I'm going to remove these pins. And so I really have what I call pseudo quarters, because technically they're not a quarter anymore. They're just fake quarters. So I'm going to remove these pins, and what that does is it gives me a more elastic from the side to the front and less elastic from the side to the back. And that is going to true up that side seam so it's more under your arm rather than facing towards your belly. So once again, here's my side pins. I'm going to place 2 new pins or marks closer to the center back. Now I usually go anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, depending how much tummy that student has. And what we'll do is we'll have fewer gathers across the front, which is fine. A few more across the back, and nobody pays attention to the back, but that's going to give your pant a much nicer fit. Okay, I have a couple other garments I want to show. This is my Sedona skirt, and this is very popular. It's a 5-panel skirt. It can be made long or short. Can be made out of a heavy fabric like this denim, can be made from a very lightweight fabric like challis. Add some belt loops and it makes a really great jean skirt. Here's my Maui pants, and I called it the Maui pants. I was looking for a pair of elastic waist pants that rode on the high hip rather than at the waist, and I couldn't find one. So I designed a pattern. There are 3 different waistbands on this. You can use a draw cord elastic. You can make your own draw cord, or you can simply do an elastic waist. And now I realized I called it Maui pants, but I made it out of flannel for winter. So I know they do have Christmas in Hawaii. And then behind me, my Baja skirt is a tiered skirt, and lots of fun fabrics you can make it out of. The Del Rey just hangs beautifully at the hem. It's an all bias skirt. And then again, the Maui pants. And you will find those on my website at greatcopy.com. And so this, once again, this is Patty Otto for Sew It Online.
Hi everyone, Michelle here with Sew It Online, and I've had a lot of questions come to me about how to do a cover hem. So a cover hem is that seam, that hem that's on the bottom of a pair of pants, the cuff of a shirt. the bottom of a shirt. You know, there's kids' t-shirts, pretty much anything you're wearing right now probably has a cover hem on it. So a cover hem is a stitch that we do on a serger. Now this particular serger I'm using today is the Baby Lock Euphoria. It is solely a cover hem and chain stitch machine. We're going to be doing a wide cover stitch here in a second, but I want to show you a couple things that we need to kind of be aware of when we are doing a cover stitch. So some people will have done a twin needle on their sewing machine, and that mimics a cover hem, but it's so much easier on a serger. Now the Baby Locks have an Ovation, Evolution, Accolade, Triumph. Those are all combination machines. Those are an overlock machine and a cover machine at the same time. They're a two-in-one machine. This particular one is just the cover hem. If you've got the room in your sewing room, I would really recommend having an overlocker and a cover hem, but it's just as easy to have a combo machine and switch these out because of the air threading system that's on these Baby Lock sergers. So let's get started with kind of learning about the cover hem. Now there's some supplies that will make things a little bit easier for you, and let's talk about them. So one of the first things I do like to make sure I have is, like on the Euphoria, on the Triumph, I can use what's called a fabric guide. A fabric guide is a ruler that is connected to the serger using a couple of screws. And we're attaching it to the machine because the flatbed that goes on the serger doing a cover hem already has the screw holes in it. So it will anchor any accessory that you want to put down on the machine and use it outside. So a belt loop binder, a bias binder, double fold bias binder, all those are attached to the sewing table so that you can use that cover stitch a whole lot easier. So we're going to attach that to the machine, and again, it's just 2 screws. We're just going to attach this. Now if you have the Baby Lock Evolution, there is also a fabric guide for that machine. It's not as big as this one, but it works just as well. It just makes it a whole lot easier because I can flip this up and then I have a guide where my fabric is going to go, so I don't have to put any marks, any tape, anything like that on my machine. So I'm just going to anchor that down for just a second, and let's talk about some of the other things that we can use. One of the things that make it a little bit easier is what they call a Teflon sole foot. A Teflon sole foot has just that, a Teflon backing to it. So it glides over knit fabrics or cotton fabrics with ease, and it won't kind of like make your fabric stutter going underneath it. So I really like the Teflon foot. Now you can also use the chain and cover stitch foot. That also works well. There's also a clear foot. That also will help you come around. So there's multiple feet you can use. Today I'm going to use the Teflon foot. One of the things I do want to show you though on the Teflon foot, and this is most of the feet on the Baby Locks, is that we've got these little notches down here. Those notches line up with the needles. So today I'm doing a wide cover stitch. I'm using the C1 and the C3 needle. So my position, I'm going to have a needle right here, and I'm going to have a needle right here in the C3 position. So let me put that foot on the machine. It's very easy to take the feet on and off of the Baby Locks. I like to come in from the left, making sure that my threads are not underneath the foot. And then I can push the little button in the back. This is the one that helped me take the foot off. I can snap it back on and it clamps that foot back on. So if you didn't line it up quite right, that'll help you get the foot securely back on the machine. So we've got a Teflon foot and our fabric guide on here. The next thing I want to use are some things just to help me do the cover hem, make it a little bit easier. I do like to use fray check or fray block. It's a seam sealant. It seals your fabric or your thread tails so they don't come undone. The fray check works really well. I do prefer a little bit more on the fray block. It's in the tube. And remember, read the directions on the fray block because you should put it in a like a cup of warm water before you use it. But you put just a drop of the seam sealants where you need it to go, let it dry, and then you can clip your threads. Now, the nice part about the seam sealant, when you're doing a rolled hem on napkins and tablecloths, you can, get that beautiful rolled hem all the way around your fabric, do the fray block, and then cut it after it dries, and your seams will not come out. Your rolled hem will stay perfect even through multiple washings. So I do like fray check and fray block as a seam sealant. Another thing I like to use, and it's kind of like a little cheat, but I actually like a fabric glue stick. A fabric glue stick is if I'm going to put maybe a side seam together, or if I'm going to do a cover hem and I'm like don't have a stay tape with me, and I'll talk about that here in a second. It's just nice to put a little dab of a fabric glue stick, bring up the hem, and then pat it down, and it will help keep my fabric in place as I'm stitching. So I was talking about these stay tapes. Now, there's more than one type of stay tape, and the one I have today is a Dritz. It's a 1/2 inch stay tape, and this is basically what it looks like right here, okay? It's kind of like a woven fiber. It's a strip. They come in 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. Some are fusible, some are double-sided fusible. It really depends on the application and what you need. This particular one is not a fusible. I like to use this when I'm working with a knit fabric because I don't want that knit to roll or move on me as I'm doing the cover hem. And it stays in, it doesn't add any bulk to your seam or when you're in your hem, and it can stay in there. A glue stick, if you use that, will actually just wash out, but your cover hem is in place, you don't have to worry about it. So when I use this stay tape, and there's another one, it's from Keys is another stay tape that works really well. So you're gonna take the piece, the length that you need off of the roll, and you're gonna give it just a little pull, and you're gonna see where it wants to roll. Do you see where it wants to roll a little bit? That's where you will put it on your one side of your fabric. You'll pin it on, bring the other side up and repin it, and it will just help stabilize that fabric and keep it flat for you, okay? Another one that you can use, other than a stay tape, is a fusible web. Now, I use this quite a bit when I put zippers in. It's a tape where this is a 1/4 inch. It's very small, but you can get a little bit wider ones. And I'll just do like maybe little spots here and there. Bring up my fabric. This is something you don't use the iron with. You'll put it down, peel the paper off, bring your fabric up on it, and it'll stay in place. And then this washes out. Okay, it is a fusible web, and but again, it just keeps things in place until you're done serging. So I like to use those stay tapes, especially with a knit fabric that looks like this. Now this is a real pretty knit fabric, real lightweight, and I pressed it, but if I would kind of manhandle this, do you see how that wants to curl? That curl can be really irritating when you're trying to do a rolled hem. So when I go and I put my stay tapes in, I usually prefer the fusible, but I will use the pin-in one. I will press my hem up, make sure it's nice and even all the way around, and I will kind of not manhandle my fabric. I'll go nice and gentle. I will lift this up. I will put my stay tape down, and then I'll bring my hem up. So it's in there. Okay, I don't have to mess with it, and I just kind of be gentle with my fabric so I don't have that curl, okay? You can use this on any kind of knit fabric. It's not going to hinder anything. So I'm going to work with a cotton fabric today, but I wanted you to know how to work it with a knit fabric. One of the things that I love to do is go on YouTube, especially Sew It Online, and different books that are out there for serging, because I'm always looking to learn something new on the serge. You can never stop learning, right? So one of the books I really like is called Serger Essentials, and it's from Gail Patrice Yellen. She does quite a few videos on baby locks and on the Berninas, but this book is really a nice beginner Serger Essentials. I pick it up every now and then just to kind of remind me of different things that I may have forgotten that I can do to make things a little bit easier. Okay, so look for that book when you can. All right, so we need to do a cover hem, right? So I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks on a cover hem, and then I'm going to see if I can show you an even better trick at the very end. So let's talk about the cover hem. How the machine is set up right now is I have it set up for a wide cover stitch. My stitch length, which is a large knob on the bottom, is set at 3 in the standard section. I have my blade, if I was working on the Triumph or the Ovation or the Accolade or Evolution, I want to make sure my blade is down. I do not want to cut off my hem, okay? I do not need to set my stitch width. The stitch width is set as to where my needles are placed. So if I have my needles in the C1 and C3 position, that's my wide cover stitch. If I want a narrow cover stitch, I'm going to put it in C1 and C2 or C2 and C3 needle positions. That's going to give me my narrow cover stitch. I can also do a triple cover stitch. A triple cover stitch is going to have all 3 needles in there. Now, I do like a triple cover stitch if I'm going to be decorating my fabric. So I can set it up with 2 regular, like serger threads in my needles and a 12 weight thread. In fact, I think I have one here. Here's a 12 weight thread from Sulky. It's a great decorative thread to put in my looper, and I can get a beautiful chain stitch or cover stitch and work with my fabric upside down. I can embellish my fabric and then cut out my pattern. But I've done some beautiful stitches with the heavier weight thread. 12 or 30 weight thread works beautifully. All right, so what else do we have? My differential feed is on neutral or on N right now. If I was working with the knit, I would probably test it to see if I need to change my differential feed to make sure those fabrics come together. Using those stay tapes will help keep that fabric in line. Now, if you ever do any kind of serging, the #1 rule is to test. Always, always test. So we're going to run the machine through, but I want you to make sure, again, C1 and C3 are my needles. My stitch length is on 3. My stitch width, I don't have to mess with because my needles are setting the stitch width. And on the Euphoria, my tension, which is for my chain or my cover hem thread, is going to be between 0 and 1. Look at your quick reference guide for the Triumph and the Evolution, and they're going to tell you exactly what to put that setting on. The other thing I like to use are the ELX 705 needles. Now, Baby Lock has that in their user manual, and they prefer you to use those when you're doing the cover hem. They are a semi-ballpoint needle that can work with knits or for wovens. The important thing is to make sure you use the same needle and the same size needle, and make sure they're all the way up in the machine. If you have skipped stitches, a lot of times that needle is not all the way up. On the Euphorias and pretty much all the Baby Locks, way at the top above the needles, we have this little window, and I can see the top of the needles. I can make sure my needles are all the way up. So make sure you look way at the top to make sure that they're all the way up. The other thing you're going to notice when you do a cover hem is that your needles are on an angle. The bottom of the needles literally are on a slant, okay? And that's normal. They are not supposed to be straight across. If they're straight across, then you know one of your needles is not in the up position, like all the way up in the machine. So let me do a quick practice here just to make sure that we have a good stitch going. Now, people say, well, what's the difference between a cover hem and an overlock stitch? So a cover hem literally covers the fabric. It's on top of the fabric. The overlock stitch is going to ride, and it's going to be on the very edge of the fabric, and it's going to cut your fabric and cut off whatever you don't need and give you a perfect stitch on the edge of the fabric. The cover hem is in the middle of the fabric. Now, when we are overlocking and we have like a 4-thread overlock set up on the machine, we can run our machine without any fabric in there, and it will run and run and run, and all we have is just thread, and it's making this beautiful chain, right? Well, when you're doing a cover hem, you need fabric to create the stitches. You can put your foot down and it's gonna, it's gonna run, but there's no stitches that are gonna happen because on a cover hem, it needs fabric to create the stitch. So let me run my test through here real quick. Now, I had a chain going all the way to the very end, and then it just kind of dissipated. All my threads just kind of came apart, right? Well, that's because there was no more fabric underneath the foot. So as soon as I put fabric back into the machine, my stitches are going to be created again. So this is my cover hem, this is the needles, and then this is my cover hem stitch on the underside. Beautiful stitch. Okay, so we've got our test done. So I have some fabric here that I have pressed under. Now, there's some options when you do the cover hem. Now, I have a dark maroon fabric, so I wanted you to be able to see the white thread on there, but you can certainly use thread that matches your fabric, or if you want it to contrast, that's okay too. So option number one is that you would fold up your fabric to wherever the hem wants to be. Now this is just a flat fabric for right now. I will show you how to stitch in the round here in a few minutes. So this is one option, just to fold your fabric up one time, give it a good press, make sure it's nice and straight, okay? And if you want to use the glue stick or the stay tapes in there, you can certainly insert those at this point. One of the things you may look at when you look at your hem that's on your shirt is that it almost looks like there's an overlock stitch and a chain stitch or a cover hem at the same time. And a lot of times there is. So what they have done is they take the raw edge of your hem and they will run it through a 3-thread or a 4-thread overlock. It just cleans up the edges of your fabric. Then they will fold it up, and then they will do the cover hem on top of that. So there's no fraying of the fabric. You may have that a little bit with the cotton fabrics. You're not going to have that with the knit fabrics because they just don't fray. So, but this kind of keeps those thread ends nice and secure, real pretty, and they don't come apart, especially washing after washing. So that's option one, is to fold it under one time, and you can even do that edge. Another option is to fold it under twice. So I folded my hem under one time, and then I folded it under again, and I gave it a good press. Okay? Now this is going to add a little bit more bulk on the bottom of your hem or the bottom of your garment. So kind of be aware, if it's a real lightweight fabric, you may only want to go up one time with the hem. If you want it a little bit heavier, you can certainly do this. Now, I have found if I do fold it up twice, a lot of times I can just feel my fabric when it goes under my foot, and I really don't need a fabric guide because I can feel where that fabric edge is. So let's learn the technique about how to serge and with a cover hem, but knowing we have to get the threads to the back of the fabric. We can't just serge off like we would on a cover hem. on an overlock stitch, we can't just serge right off. We have to go all the way around, and then we have to get those threads to the back. So I'm going to move this fabric guide out of the way for just a little bit, and we're going to do the technique just in a flat piece of fabric for the time being, and then I'll show you how to do it in the round. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the fabric all the way up to the needles. And when we do this in the round, I'll show you that we don't want to start on a seam. A seam is going to add a lot of bulk right off the bat. So I always start with like before the seam, and I usually come from the back and move forward. But let's do this technique so you know how to serge in the round, okay? And to get those threads to the back. So we're going to serge. And I'm just going to stop right there for the moment just to show you the technique. So my needles are down into the machine. The first thing I want to do is take my hand wheel that's on the far right hand side of my machine and turn it toward me so that my needles are all the way up. They're in their highest position. The next thing I want to do is put my presser foot lifter up. This releases all of the tension that are on those threads so that I can now move those needle threads without any struggle. I'm going to either take a stiletto, I'm just going to use my little screwdriver here, my little Allen wrench here. You can use tweezers, anything that's thin. You want to take it and go behind the presser foot, okay, above the fabric, but behind the presser foot, and bring those threads toward you and just kind of scoop them forward about maybe 4 or 5 inches. And then I'm going to give it a clip. Okay, and I have my needle threads are cut, okay, but my chain thread is still intact. So now I'm going to take my fabric, I'm going to put my hand this way so you can see it better. I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to go straight back toward the back of the machine, okay. Now I still have my chain stitch here, so I'm going to cut that one, but I want you to look. This is where I ended, right there. And my threads are in the back of the fabric. Do you see? All 3 threads are back here. Okay? Now, at this point, I like to tie them in a knot, and I can use that fray check or fray block and put a little seam sealant on there. But they're pretty much locked in. They're not going anywhere. Okay? So we started and we just went. The big thing is get those needles out of the fabric, get the presser foot lifter up to release the tension on those threads, and then go straight back. If for some reason you go straight back, but you still have maybe a thread is still stuck up front, all you got to do is thread it with a regular needle and bring it to the back of the fabric, and then knot the threads together. It really doesn't matter what you knot together, as long as the 3 threads are all together. So let's take a look on how that will work doing like a cuff or a pant leg. So I have a piece of fabric that I've just kind of made a pretend cuff on, okay? And I just have a seam here. It's just with a sewing machine. I could certainly have done it with a serger, and I pressed it flat, and I have just a single fold up on my cuff here, okay? Now there's different ways to do a cover hem as to placing your fabric underneath the machine. Some people like to put it under with seeing, we're going to see the wrong side up. If you do that, remember your needles are going to be on the inside of your material and your chain looper thread is going to be on the outside. So make sure, if you're not sure, that you have your fabric the way it's supposed to go. Again, always do a test, all right? So I found it always easier to have my right side of my fabric is going to be showing, okay? But I want to show you something here. When we go to start serging our cover hem, sometimes we struggle getting the threads or getting the fabric underneath the foot. So in order to get those threads to release off of the stitch fingers, I'm going to turn my hand wheel toward me, okay? And then I'm gonna rock it back just a little bit and my threads are going to release. The threads are now off from down, you know, off of those stitch fingers, and I can slide my fabric underneath my needles with no problem, okay? I can get them under wherever I want that hem to be. So how do we figure out where is this hem gonna go, right? I mean, do I want my stitches on a wide cover stitch, one here and one there to cover that raw edge? Do I want them both here? Or do I want them way down here? So again, do a test with the fabric you're actually using so you can figure out what looks best for you, all right? So we have, I'm gonna put this a little bit closer to my raw edge right here. So the first thing that I like to do is I put my fabric in wrong side up. I'm gonna bring it in. And I'm going to move my fabric guide over so I know exactly where my cover hem is going to land. I think that works real good. Make sure my screws right here are nice and tight. Okay. Now, I don't want to serge with the wrong side facing up. I want the right side facing up. So I'm going to take it out, and because my fabric guide is set, now I'm going to put the fabric under the machine. And do you see how I have the right side of my fabric is up? Let me pull that out a little bit. There we go. Now, I want to find out where is my seam. My seam is over here, okay? So when I start my cover stitch, I don't start on the seam itself. So if I have a side seam here, you know, or even over here, I'm going to start toward the back of that and then go all the way around. Because in all reality, if I miss my stitches going over a little bit, it's in the back of my garment, okay? I'm not too worried about it. So let me put the fabric back underneath the foot here. I have it lined up with my fabric guide. I'm going to put my fabric, my presser foot lifter down. Now, when I go to stitch this, this is a pretty wide cuff. Now, you may have some kids' cuffs that are like, you know, 3 inches in diameter. Those are crazy small. So you're going to have to do like an inch or two at most, or even a ½ inch, stop and adjust your fabric. So let me get started with this. My foot is down, and we're going to start stitching. And I'm just going to go a little bit at a time. And I'm really not watching the needles. I'm watching where my fabric is right up against this wall where my fabric guide is. So I'm going to keep going. Readjust my fabric. Now, I have seen some instructors will actually do where their fabric is completely right side out. Okay, I don't see the inside, and that's okay too. You're gonna find what works best for you. But I tell you what, once you get busy with this, doing a cover hem, you're gonna be able to do all those shirts that are too long for you, or those sleeves that you wanna shorten, or maybe you're repurposing a garment that you wanna change up a little bit. This will work beautifully. So I'm coming around, keep going. Okay, so right here is where my beginning stitches started, right here, okay? See if you can see that. I have 2 threads here, okay? Those are my beginning serger threads, okay? My needle threads. So I can do a couple things here. I can leave them intact, okay, and then cut them later, like move them with a needle and bring them to the back later. I actually like to cut them at this point. I'm just going to snip them real close to the fabric. Now, here's the key when it comes to bringing those needle threads over this. You want to overlap two or three stitches, okay? So that you can see, so you anchor those stitches in, okay? So when I have my foot that has those notches on it, I'm going to make sure that my initial stitches here, let me get this, line up with my C1 needle position, and this is my C3 needle. I want to make sure it lines up with that. If I was using, there's an open toe foot, that one will also work well doing a cover hem. I can see those threads coming up. I can also use a clear foot. That will help me see my threads coming up. But I'm going to take it nice and easy for a little bit, and I want to make sure that if I have to adjust, I'm going to adjust my fabric so that they are coming to go completely over it perfectly. If I have to, I can also turn my hand wheel manually to get those right on top. All right, so we're going to see how close I can get. And it's okay to turn your hand wheel always toward you when you're doing this so that you can overlap. And you just need to overlap like 2 or 3 stitches. So it's still coming. I can just see them right there. They're just about there. And let's see, I think I'm good. Okay, now this is, if I've overlapped them, this is where I want to use that technique that I did before. Now, if I haven't done a cover stitch for a while, I'm going to practice this because I think I can see my stitches have not overlapped each other perfectly, but I'm okay with that because it's easy to rip this out. And guess what? I'm going to show you how to rip this out and get to go right back and do it again. But I can use other products to help me line things up. A clear foot works really well, or one that has that open toe. But again, we're doing a cover hem. You'll get the gist of it, okay? All right, so now what I want to do is do that technique. I have clipped my threads. I have overlapped or tried to overlap my stitches. I'm going to put my needles in the highest position. I'm going to put my presser foot lifter up. And remember, I take that little screwdriver and I'm going to go behind the foot but above the fabric, and I'm going to scoop those needle threads toward me. I'm going to cut my threads, and then I'm going to go straight back, okay? So you can see I was way off on that cover hem, okay? But it's okay because, one, I can do this again. This is my practice. I'm going to be able to overlap it. And then I'm going to also use thread that matches my fabric. So if I don't get it perfectly, it's okay, all right? So yeah, I want you to see the back of my hem. And do you see how nice and close I got to where I wanted it to be? That fabric guide helped me immensely to get it to exactly where I wanted it to go. So this is my hem, and do you see it even went over my hem? And I would probably even put maybe even a glue stick, just a little dab right there to keep my seam open because I really don't want a lot of bulk right there. But this is my hem. How pretty is that? And do make sure that you clip that last thread that's still on the machine, okay? But that's a beautiful cover hem right there. So here's some tips if you're working with it and you do your test and then you've got, like, it doesn't look quite right. Maybe it looks like a tunnel and it's kind of like a bump in between the stitches. Try setting your tension a little bit lower, okay? whether it be on, like on the Euphoria, there's an auto tension and it's on 0 right now. I can adjust that a little bit, or I can even change the tension on my chain looper thread, and to get that thread to flatten out, to get those stitches to flatten out a little bit. So this is going to be your cover hem. This is a wide cover stitch, but remember those things that I told you about? Everybody asks, well, how do you get those stitches out? You know, if you screw up a cover hem, there's supposed to be this trick, right, on how to get the stitches out so you can redo it. And there is. Now, I've been practicing it a little bit more and more, and there is a couple things that you need to be aware of. I'm going to take this fabric guide off here for a second. So I'm going to do a stitch, and I'm just going to stitch from the very beginning all the way to the very end. Okay, I'm at the very end. I'm going to put the presser foot up, and maybe I see like, oh, I don't like what happened here. I'm going to cut my thread. Now, this is where I stopped. This is where I finished. This is where I started, okay? You always want to know, where did you finish? That's the key. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my thread. Yep, let me take this. I'm going to cut my thread over here, okay? And then again, this is right in the end where I finished. I want to clip a couple of my needle threads, just like 2 or 3 needle threads. And hopefully this will work. Then you turn it over, and you want to grab your chain looper thread, and it completely comes out all the way down. Look how fast that comes off. You can never go wrong to get a thread out, a cover hem stitch out of your fabric, if you always know where you finished. Now I just have the needle threads, and they just pull right out. So if I make a mistake, or if I'm doing the cover hem, and I go around like, oh, my fabric is bunching up, or something's happening with my fabric, I can stop right then and there, serge off, okay? And I can pull my needle threads and my chain looper thread out that fast and start again. So that's a great tip for everybody to know how to do on your cover hem, okay? So again, make sure you know where you finished. Clip it at the end, cut a couple of the needle threads, and then just pull that looper thread and it'll all come undone, okay? So with that said, you know that the needle threads hold the looper thread in place. So it's nice to know the mechanics and how your serger works and how it works for you when it comes to, because it's all mechanical, this particular machine, and it's just nice to know what does what. So that's our cover hem today. I hope you'll get those clothes that are a little bit too long, or maybe, you know, you want the sleeves shortened a little bit, those pair of jeans shortened a little bit, okay? The dress pants changed a little bit. It's very easy to do. You start getting those tops done one at a time, they're gonna be stacked up and you're gonna be busting through them really fast, okay? So enjoy the cover stitch, give it a try, do some practices before you do it, and make sure you get those threads overlapping by a couple, okay? But enjoy the cover stitch and get those garments altered the way you need them. Have a good day, everybody.